Welcome to Anne Season 6. I'm Dave Evans, and this is, of course...
Double D.
Yeah, are you there, Debbie?
Yes, I'm here.
Fantastic. We're really excited because this season is all about talking to people about their and. And one of the things that we want to make sure is that when we think about the word and, we think about meaning. Doesn't matter whether you're adding that meaning to a micro thing or an important thing, right? It's having meaning in your day. We know it's better for you. We know it helps your well-being. And we even heard in this season about 8 hours of meaningful work a week transforms your all-round health. So, Debbie, who do we have with us?
We have, amazingly, because this really brings me deep joy, is Anna Campbell Jones, who is design extraordinaire, has got so much that to her list of skills, but I'm going to pass over to Anna. Anna, if we were talking about you to a complete alien, how would they describe what you have done in your life so far?
Well, hello, and thank you very much for having me on your podcast. I suppose when you get to my age, 55, you've done quite a lot of stuff, but at the centre of it has always been, since I was 18, a desire to be an interior designer. So that is my sort of central focus, certainly from a work point of view, anyway. Yeah. But I've also got, I present a show called Scotland's Home of the Year. I've done other little bits of TV. I get asked on programmes on the radio to give my opinion on all sorts of things, not necessarily even interior design stuff. I've been on a couple of politics television programmes as well. And I have always been also involved in education, certainly in design field, since for the last 25 years. I used to lecture part-time at the art school at the same time as running my practice. Since stopping teaching at the art school after nearly 20 years there, I have continued to seek out opportunities to enhance young people's, well, everybody's knowledge of design, specifically interior design. I've also been talking about sustainability, about female empowerment, about loving midlife, which is, I literally feel like I'm having the best time right now. And sustainability is something I'm very passionate about, and I've been getting involved in lots of things to do with that. So yeah, lots and lots and lots and lots of hats, lots of ands, I suppose.
You also have your own home range. You have, I mean, this excites me so much. So you need to talk about Dazzle. You need to talk about the collab with No Rules wallpaper. People don't know. So we're going to cram all this in.
Okay.
Have my first question, because I think this is really fascinating for me, is for me, that when somebody asks me what's your and, I'm still exploring it and I'm still finding it. Like you say, it's encompassed in many different roles in my life, so not a defining moment. But knowing at 18 that interior design was something that you enjoyed, or what was it? And was it that definitive that you then made life choices towards that direction?
Yeah, I probably everything stems from that moment up until I was about, well, when I was 13, I was in a movie. I played the lead in a David Putnam film, and I had always wanted to be an actor. And I used to be in all of the productions at school and so on, and all the choirs, a bit of a show off, you know. And so I did this movie, like a proper actual movie, and I went on a chat show to promote it about a year after we'd done the filming. And you know how young people change between 13 and 14. And suddenly there I was, this like mini punk, all attitude, slouching on the sofa, and kind of, they were saying, well, what's your next project? And I was like, yeah, no, I'm bored of acting. I want to go to art school. So yeah, that was when I shifted. I mainly wanted to go to art school to meet hot boys and join a band or something. I don't know. But gradually I kind of got more focused. And my father was an architect, and I often say that me becoming an interior designer, whilst it's connected to that, it's a bit of an act of rebellion, because he hated interior designers. But he did show me what you can do with a space or with a building, this idea that you can create something three-dimensional on a really large scale. So yeah, it was the scale and the three-dimensionality that appealed to me, and interior design seemed to have more opportunities for being a bit more creative.
I think you ooze creativity there. I'm excited about the fact you sat in our house and talked to us here with or without cameras, right? And in both domains, and did it really wonderfully. But I think you and Debbie, as two influential women that I know, have added so much to things that I've learned just by being around the fringes of the industry you represent. I can testify to you both and to you, Anna, the difference it makes to my mind every day, for the better.
So extending to a bit of that as well is knowing that art is creative, it's that element, it's an outlet. And I find it really fascinating that, you said you were kind of like a mini punk, and then you've matured, and that's natural style that you have. It's not just interiors, it's Anna, right? It's a package. How is that transition and how has it grown? So, you do a lot about sustainability. I think that's really important to share, but knowing that heart element is art displayed at the moment in interior design. And again, if you actually look at that list of things that you've said, all hugely creative. How does it extend into that, and where does that go for you? What does it mean, and how do you live that, as an and element?
Yeah. It's interesting because really, on paper, I should have been a nice, polite little Sloane Ranger with, a barber jacket and a stockbroker husband or something. So I definitely was a bit of an outlier in terms of like my family and the social circle and so on, and the kind of school that I went to. But I think my mum was a child of the 60s. And I think she'd always been a little bit rebellious, although she kept it quite well hidden. And she encouraged me from a very young age to be comfortable in being my authentic self, whatever that might be. I don't think she realized that she got a bit more than she bargained for. My teenage years were quite rocky for her, I think. But I think that kind of foundation of understanding it's okay to be yourself, whatever that is also the foundation of creativity.
Because I do think it's huge. And I suppose this extends into all of these different roles. And I think one thing I've admired about you is your voice, your ability to not only narrate a story, which we see through the TV and the presentation of that, but also I've listened to so many of your talks, from even the political ones, which I've always kind of, I'm a bit voyeuristic when it comes to politics, because I just love the debate and the argument, and I kind of I navigate my way, I change. But authenticity through creativity, but also it takes so much effort to also work out who we are sometimes. And I am always fascinated by people who say, well, at 18, I really knew my direction. I really knew where I wanted to go. Our daughter's a music teacher, and very young, 10, 11 years old. That's what I'm going to be. This is where I'm going to. I just love that. And I've never discovered it myself. So what if somebody was pondering at any age, as we now know, very similar age group. I'm 54 this time. So knowing that, and that we have these multiple roles and multiple ands that we coexist in, what would you challenge somebody on, or not, however, what language you use, to really find self?
Okay, so I think something that I have learned more recently in middle age, the sort of freedom that I have found in middle age is realizing that is not a finite quest, that at the same time as accepting yourself and your authenticity, you also have to accept that is something that's constantly changing. The lucky thing about somebody like me or your daughter, who's chosen at an early age to pursue a creative career, is that the free act of being creative is about constantly reinventing yourself, constantly testing your ideas, constantly asking yourself that question in a conscious way, consciously conscious. I mean, it's kind of part and parcel of being creative. Whereas I think in other worlds of work, I think people can perhaps mistakenly feel that it's a much more linear thing, and that there is some kind of pinnacle that you can get to and then you're done and you never stop. Creative people don't. You see all these actors and artists, and they're basically still painting or performing until they fall over, because it's the same thing as your life.
But Is there not some deep connection? Because I also know this is another thing that you have spoke about, is about mental health, creativity, this continuous cycle. There's this whole world of comparison. So whether we look at all of the elements that you do, so even from am I sustainable enough? You're not sustainable enough. You're not good enough to do this. I think there's like this full circle for me around when we understand that about ourselves, it doesn't stop us from falling into these big traps and these big holes of shit, actually, am I okay? Where I want to be. How do you avoid that, or how do you manage that?
Yeah, well, I would definitely say I haven't avoided it. I've had some really, really dark times over the years. I think the whole point is, there's no light without shade, that you do have to have those periods where you feel a bit hopeless to recalibrate and kind of reinvent yourself. And again, not reinvention in a finite way, but just as the kind of next cycle. I know that people are a bit bored of talking about lockdown activities and so on, but for me, obviously, because my work was involved very much in going into people's homes, it all stopped incredibly suddenly. And because I worked really hard, my creative outlet was completely cut off at the source. It went from constantly doing stuff and creating things and going on site and persuading builders to make something weird, or I know you know what that's like, to nothing. And the vacuum that I didn't consciously realize, like I felt really sad and really despondent. And obviously it was about what was going on in the world, but it was also something personal. And I did a lot of thinking. We all had a lot of time to think, and I realized it was because I wasn't producing anything. And I remembered that when I was a little girl, I used to do needlepoint, and I ordered a roll of blank needlepoint canvas and a bag of odds and ends of lines of bits of different colors of wool, and just started doing random tapestries, like not from a pattern, not a vase of flowers or a rabbit or something like that. And I started doing that, and I started to feel better because I was doing something with my hands, and I was thinking about color combinations, and I was doing something tactile. If you hear the sound of padding paws, it's my cat. She's probably going to walk. And yeah, and one of the things that I looked at, I've always been really interested in dazzle camouflage, which you mentioned earlier there, Debbie, the system that was used in the First World War to camouflage goods and troop ships from the torpedoes of U-boats, which is this incredible multicolored geometric designs that were created by a merchant seaman called Norman Wilkinson, who had been an artist before that. And in a way, that's quite a sweet example, because he'd been a full-time artist painting maritime scenes, apologies. And then he was signed up to the Navy because there was a war on, and he had a creative idea in that vacuum, which was to paint thousands of ships with multicolored patterns. So so I started putting dazzle camouflage onto tapestry canvases and making them into cushions, and then life got back to normal. I was back on site, was back building houses and stuff like that and helping people. And then I just felt like I was too frazzled. I was doing the TV and all these other things, that list that I gave you earlier, and I was like, something's got to give. I can't cope with it's too many, my brain's being pulled in too many directions, and I was starting to sort of flail again. And I thought, I know what I'll do. I'll only do consultancy, and I won't do any project management anymore. And that will give me some peace from the noise of project management. And yeah, and I thought I'll sit and I'll read books and I'll do mind improving things, and maybe I'll actually start gardening this garden that I've had for 25 years that is just a jungle. But of course, all I did was create a vacuum, and what rushed into that vacuum was this like, oh, why don't I start a brand? And if I did a brand, what would it look like? And then I was like, oh, I've been doing these dazzle tapestries. Maybe it would be dazzle camouflage. And then there I am, right back in, starting another business and running around like, the proverbial chicken. So, yeah, I don't know if that really answers your question.
No, I think, no, I love it. I'm a lover of tangents. I think there's also a creative element that allows us to expand there. But I think that's the point, isn't it? That, you can say, what's my and, but it ends up being multifaceted. We talk about evolution and revolution, and rather than being these very conflicting things, they're actually marriage in partner. We're always evolving, but there are times in our life when there is a huge revolution. There is something that changes. The COVID is a great example of that, is where we either got that point where everything just stopped, completely stopped. For us, it was the opposite, because people needed conversation. They needed, to up that. So we were even busier than we ever were before, helping people. And it's funny how different industries and different ways that people interacted. So I get that completely. And I do love that kind of metamorphosis, but also realizing what is working and what isn't, and what you can do with it. And I'll also make sure that everybody's got the link to the stuff. Because Dave, do you know what the camouflage dazzle stuff is?
It was something that was taken from the ideas of Norman Wilkinson, Davey, way back in the UK.
I don't think I've ever actually shown him, but I do think it's really fascinating, because it's you've brought something that was on these vast submarines and ships and translated it into something that literally befits a home, from furniture to candles to blankets. Got to get all this right, because there's a lot. So for me would be is of these and elements that you've got, from TV presenting right through to being a creator and a brand, what are the things that challenge you the most or bring the deepest joy? Which are the ones that help you kind of maintain all the other elements?
Oh gosh, that is really, really hard, because there's so many different things that I do. And actually I have this informal arrangement with a couple of female friends of mine of a similar age, who are also not, shall we say, informally employed. And we get together whenever we can and have like a work meeting, like a sort of action group, really, where we'll go around the table and we'll talk about what we're up to and give each other support and help and advice, and a kind of outside look in. And it was actually when I was sort of talking to them, and the more I described what I was doing, and I'm developing this other product, and I've been doing a collaboration with this company and that company, and this person has contacted me, and maybe I'm going to be doing some writing, which would be really, really interesting. And they were like, there's so much going on in your head. And I said, I'm really struggling to get a handle on how to organize it in my head, because it's not, if I do a list, that's terrifying, because it's almost infinite. They saw it from the outside and they were like, well, we can spot themes. So instead of thinking of all of those different things that I do as separate ands, they helped me organize them into themes. And that then helps me work out what I do next. Like if I'm offered to do something, does it fit one of my themes? And if it doesn't, then I can say no. And it gives me this sort of structure for how to navigate my way through what people would call very much a portfolio career. And certainly, there's lots of people have got careers that are complex and layered, but I don't think anybody's got a career that's quite exactly the same as mine that I could sort of look to and take an example from. So my themes were home, education, female empowerment, and sustainability. And if something that I'm asked to do doesn't tick one of those boxes, although I was allowed to say yes to things just because they were fun.
Yeah.
So that's like a kind of fifth extra category, because fun is really important. I think
there's a couple of things, Anna, that you've said that I want the listeners to capture, right? So right early on in this conversation, you were really clear about knowing who you are is the foundation to creativity. And I think that's a mic drop in itself. You also talked about authenticity is not a finite quest. So if you're listening to this episode today, that's super important. You've demonstrated bounceability in those moments, as you talked about. Let's stay in the creative. There's no shade without light, and vice versa. And I love that. And without having to ask you, you demonstrated working your way through things. In your story about COVID, and not for anybody listening, we're not revisiting COVID. I love the fact you knew yourself well enough to find things that would help you, even if you weren't sure at the time that they were going to do that. You did it anyway. So you put action into play. And then these four things, these themes, I love that. We call it cornerstones in RLC and I love the fact you've got yourself a lens to look through, because I imagine if you're like us, sometimes somebody will say, "Hey, Debbie," or "Hey, Dave, what do you think about this issue, project, problem?" And you want to say yes because it's nature, but actually finding the foundation to say no is a massive lesson, which you've also highlighted, Debbie.
I knew this would be an extraordinary conversation. I don't know you that well. I've only had tiny moments with you, which have all been really joyful because you brought joy to our home as well. So, but I just want to, if there was something that, if we directly said, what is your, and what thoughts went through you when you had to consider or ponder on that?
Oh, I can give you a really weird answer, but I'm synesthetic. So when I'm thinking about ideas, I see kind of patterns and colors, sort of abstract stuff. So when you asked me that question, I just got this big kind of vision of all these like colors and shapes and so on, and kind of a proliferation and a kind of confusion. I feel it's a little bit like like a table that needs, it has to have 3 legs. Maybe my table needs 5 or 6. But yeah, as I say, I experimented with trying to stop doing one thing, and then I gave myself something else to do, which, although starting a brand and managing a brand, which I do completely by myself, is different, I suppose, to project management. In a way, it scratches a similar itch, because then I'm suddenly back into spreadsheets and ordering and organizing and all of that kind of stuff that I thought was stressing me out and that I needed to avoid. And that was why I was going to not do project management anymore. And then the thing that rushed in to fill the void tickles the same tickle, So I couldn't say there's one thing.
Which is, I just find fascinating, is that when we ask, most people are quite definitive, who are you, what do you do, that kind of thing, and it becomes, like you said, it can be linear. But actually, when people start to explore it, they're going, well, actually I do this and I do that, and this skill comes out here. I love the fact that we genuinely do sometimes simplify who we are, when actually the complexity is, as you said, is weird, but I just think is glorious. I think it's that element that there is no normal, there is no perfect, there is us enjoying and doing. And I do have to say this because I need to be able to say it on a podcast, is your Friday shake your tits at, which Dave again doesn't know about, but I think is freaking genius, to have an inner circle of power women that, again, I'm only seeing it from the social aspect, but there is something that brings a deep sense of joy when I see what you post about your girlfriends and that female strength. And it doesn't mean that we have to like every single female, it doesn't mean we have to, but that there's a deep respect. I think that's what you share. Am I right in thinking that, or is it something else?
Yeah, it's really the Yas Queens, as they're called, Dave. We are a group of really quite strong women with very diverse careers and interests, and we absolutely love each other unconditionally, and we speak to each other, whether it's in a social context or because we're leaning on each other, but it's always without judgment. And I think that is the foundation. And I've not found in my life, I've not found other relationships that have fulfilled me as much as my relationships with women have done. My platonic relationships with women have done. Yeah, and that was why we started this thing that I just mentioned earlier, where there's actually about 4 or 5 of us that get together, but really there's a core of 3. And I started it in January because I realized that I was missing having kind of work colleagues, someone to kind of go to do sense checking and tell me if I'm being a wally or, that kind of stuff. And also being creative on your own. People think that having a blank canvas is a great idea, but it's the worst possible thing. You do need to collaborate. You need to talk to other people. You need, what you get is more than the sum of 2 people's thoughts when you get 2 or more people together to work on a problem. And creativity is about solving problems a lot of the time. So I started our little working group, and Wednesday afternoons, 2 till 4, hence our timing today. And it's called Work It Wednesday. And although we are great friends, have known each other for many, many, many years, we are allowed 10 minutes maximum of personal chat. And then the whiteboard comes out, the pot of tea, and we get down to business. And some of the stuff that we have been unfurling has been absolutely mind-boggling.
That's just fantastic. I don't have that network of female, and I think it's something that I've always strived for. Mine started about Sex and the City. Many of it was that 25 years ago, wherever that started. That desire to have that, but it's hodgepodge for me, and it's not as connected what you've got. And I do think I do watch it as, again, seems quite voyeuristic, my life, but in regards to, I do watch, and I just think it's just something to admire, and I think that's really important. It's not a comparison, it's definitely admiration in regards to that you have built that, because that's exactly what it is. Relationships require building. Now, before Dave goes off and does his little fantastic wrap up, 2 things I would like to. One is, if somebody wants to get hold of Anna Campbell Jones, what do they need to do on all of these roles, from politics right through to interior design, and also how do they get hold of you and your products?
Okay, so the website for my products is eponymous. It's annacampbelljones.com. And there is a way of emailing me through that website. That's, if people want to use email, that's maybe the easiest way. My favorite social media platform is Instagram, which is, again, Anna Campbell Jones. But I'm also on Facebook, LinkedIn, and TikTok. So
good.
With my name. So should be easy to find anywhere.
That's good. And just as a final parting gift to our lovely people, is there one piece of advice that I bet you get asked this all the time, one piece of advice of combining sustainability and interior design that you think is a good thing that we can all have in our homes?
I think, look at what you've already got and give it a bit of a shuggle and a shake around, and try it in a different spot, paint it, reupholster it. But also look at maybe what members of your family have got and do some swapping.
Oh, like that.
My jam, as you know, Debbie, is about narrative interiors and interiors that tell the story of you. So ironically, although I've started a brand that is selling new stuff, I think that the story behind all of my products and the way that I've thought them through means that they are bringing a bit of the narrative of me into people's homes, and that if people are buying it because they like what I do, then that kind of fits with that concept.
Yeah, I love it. Dave, what are your thoughts? Because I do feel I've kind of consumed.
It's fine, Debbie. It's fine. I think there's a couple of things. When you asked Anna about her hand, I had a little bit of a weird experience. So I am highly visual, and I see the world all at once, which sometimes can be all-consuming. What I've learned is the terrain I see doesn't dictate the mood or the mental space I then sit in, right? I'm not suggesting for 1 minute, Anna, that's easy. But what it allowed me to do is, when you described your hand, which earlier on was lovely, I found myself writing something down. And I wrote down, as if I was you, what did I hear? I heard, you bring the abstract creative possibility to life. What did you tell me?
He's good at this.
That's beautiful, Dave.
I'll send it to you, because that's what you told me, and that's what I consumed. I'm going, I get I could see what you do, and I'm going, I need to tell you because you told me, right? So remember, you told me, I just heard it. And I think for our listeners, this is a rich tapestry of stuff in this episode of And. I love it, because I long for people listening, whoever you are and wherever you are, to grab a hold of earlier in your life than we all have, that you're enough, that you're okay, you will be okay, right? And you've really owned that today, and I'm immensely grateful and humbled in the way that you did it. And I hope our listeners get so much out of the little nuggets that were just woven in. It was beautiful. And let's finish with your early mic drop, which was a straight shot from heaven, which is, you are the foundation to creativity. What a beautiful realization. This has been And Double D. I've been Dave Evans. Debbie, you've been here, right? This has been Anna Campbell Jones. Thank you so much for hanging with us, Anna. And we're excited to for our listeners to really squeeze every drop out of this. And we'll see you on the next episode.